touch that dial. Keep it locked on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Good evening, Harlem. Welcome to Harlem Beat, a show produced by the radio journalism class here in your community at the City College of New York. I'm your host, Leilani Goodwin. On tonight's show, we'll get an inside view into the world of the NYPD. Retired NYPD commander and author Corey Pecos will help us see law enforcement from an officer's perspective. But first, reporter Messiah Sterling spoke to a man in the Bronx who said he was brutalized by the police on 2 occasions.
Quotas are illegal under New York state law. However, reports show police officers are still being directed to arrest a certain number of people in certain communities. Communities like the South Bronx, where Jerome Jackson lives. Jerome is a building superintendent who is also training to be a plumber. Although he's a working man and a tax-paying citizen, he says he has experienced unwarranted profiling and abuse from police officers since childhood, oftentimes physically brutalizing him.
I was at the age of 17, and this was in 1990. I was walking home with a basketball in my hand, coming from the park. It was like maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. The detective was actually stopped me and said I fit the description of somebody that just committed a robbery. So at that age, 17, I'm trying to figure out, like, what you mean I fit the description? I'm just coming from basketball. I got a basketball in my hand. Well, we got to take you down. So they took me to the precinct, and honestly, they smacked me up a little bit to try to get me to confess to a robbery that I didn't commit. They allowed me to call my mother, but when my mother came, before my mother came, they told me if I don't say nothing, that they'll drop the charges, the robbery charges. If I don't tell that they put their hands on me. So me not knowing better, I never said nothing. But when I went home, I told my mother because she seen my face for it. But then it was kind of too late then.
Jerome says the experience made him lose respect for police officers. Once looked upon as heroes, he now saw them as legalized gangs.
At one point in my life, I wanted to be a cop. So that's what kind of stirred me to start study being the cowboy and Indian. I started being an Indian. When we play cops and robbers, I want to be the robber. Stuff like that. It's just like the cops is no better than the kids on the block or the dude on the corner. The only difference is they got a badge. And with NWA dropping, and then I really got on that F the police type situation. And I understood what they was coming from listening to their music because I just experienced it.
Jerome says that just a few months ago, he was returning home from a cousin's apartment at night when he experienced another violent encounter with police.
So, at a certain time, the buses stopped running up in Soundview. So you would have to literally walk maybe 10, 15 blocks to catch a bus or a train. I'm walking the street trying to flag down the cab, and all of a sudden, somewhat the same scenario, but this time it was blue and white. Just pull right in front of me. What you doing out here? And I'm trying to get home. I'm trying to catch a cab so I can get home. Oh, back up, back away from the car. So I'm like, well, you pulled in front of me. Oh, you trying to be a wise ass? So they jumps out the car. So they're like, let me see some ID. So I go to reach for my ID. The other cop running, oh, who you reaching for? What you reaching for? And yoked me and threw me on the ground. I'm just trying to get home. So the other cop said, shut up, and threw his knee on my neck. He started searching me, asking me where the guns at.
But Jerome says he doesn't mind active policing in his community, but wants to see it done respectfully.
Every black man in America, just because you dress a certain way or you look a certain way, that don't mean that you out there doing nothing negative. I know for a fact they train these cops to do racial profiling. Okay, I'm cool with that, if that's what you're gonna do. But if that's what you're gonna do, it's a different way to go about it though. Every situation ain't got to be hostile. You got one or two that understand that, all right, this might be a guy who chooses to dress like that, but he's a working man, so let me approach him in a certain manner. But majority of the cops don't think like that.
So I asked Jerome, why fear an officer if you're doing nothing wrong? He told me he thinks back to his first encounter with police, in which he did nothing wrong, but was profiled, accused of a crime, and beaten for it. Situations like this, he says, instill an immediate fear rather than respect of law enforcement.
If you're a black man or a black or Hispanic, as soon as that cop approach you, a sense of fear is already planted within yourself from what's going on in society. So you're automatically nervous off the rip, whether you're doing something or not. So now, how you may react, you really can't blame that on me, or the brother or the Latino that's that's nervous and acting jitterish or whatever, because he don't know how the cop is looking at him or what the cop is thinking.
Jerome says he does not hate all police, but only hopes to see them held to the same standards as those they swear to protect.
I'm gonna tell them like they tell us: stop the violence.
Thanks, Messiah. Now that we've heard from someone who was allegedly victimized by the police, we'll hear from one of the highest ranking officers in the NYPD. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, reporters Matt Herman and Guilford McCormick will talk to retired NYPD officer Corey Pecos.
Almost daily, we see video on TV or Facebook of African Americans killed by police officers across the country. Just this past Tuesday, Deborah Danner, a 66-year-old woman who suffered from schizophrenia, was killed by NYPD veteran Sergeant Hugh Barry. In the studio with us this evening is retired NYPD Commander Mr. Corey Pecos. Mr. Pecos was one of the highest-ranking African Americans in the NYPD when he retired in 2013. He is here today to discuss his book, Once a Cop, The Street, the Law, Two Worlds, One Man. We will ask him for suggestions on how to stop police brutality. Mr. Pecos, welcome to Harlem Beat.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Pecos, you just heard Mr. Jackson say that his issue is not so much with being stopped by the police. His issue is with being stopped and beat up. How can citizens avoid being brutalized by police officers?
Yeah, I heard his story, but I can't give it so much validity because, as he said, he didn't make any complaints. So I don't know who. Not too many people get beat up and don't complain about it. And just the way he presented it. And I'm not saying that it did not happen, but yeah, there's some issues in policing with people, being roughed up or if you want to use brutalized. There are some issues, but I really can't speak on issues unless I really have facts. Mm-hmm. He was saying a lot of stuff that didn't even make sense to me while I was sitting here listening to it.
How would you go about encouraging young Americans to educate themselves to help prevent such a situation versus taking up social media outrage or not filing complaints for whatever their reasons may be?
Yeah, well, I do a lot of the speaking, so my new phrase is comply, then complain. And I'm going to say that until I turn blue, when you really drill down these incidents, these national incidents, when you really take a hard, tough look at them, if everybody, let's use Terrence Crutcher in Oklahoma, where we all saw the female cop walking out. He had his hands up in the air. He was walking to the car. I'm quite sure she was giving some type of verbal command. The only thing we heard was a guy in a helicopter saying, look, he looks dangerous. If he would have just stopped, got on the ground, put his hands in the back, we would have never knew about Terrence Crutcher. Walter Scott in South Carolina, it was a car stop. He jumped out of the car because he had a warrant, and then the cop ended up, Slater, shot him 8 times in the back. If he would have just stayed on that car stop, let the cop come, give him his life. If he had to get locked up, get locked up. But he's dead now. So my thing to America is we see what's going on in the videos. So I'm at this point, and I don't hate cops. I love cops, I did 21 years as a police officer. My daughter's a cop. My nephew's a cop. So we're watching all of these incidents on video, but everybody go right to the main point where the person got shot. I'm looking at it as a different perspective. I'm looking at everything before the shooting. Could it have been prevented? No longer am I putting on the onus on the police officers to make sure we're safe. I'm telling you, American citizens, these are things that you need to do. Stop, comply, then complain, because then you could call ACLU, your local politicians, Reverend Al Sharpton, whoever you want to get. But we got to pretty much live to see another day. I don't want to see any more of these incidents other than the Tamir Rice case where the cop just walked up and killed the young fella, or the kid in Florida, the man in Florida who was laying on the ground with his hands in the air. Other than those 2 cases, I could look at all these other incidents and really drill them down and say, you probably could have did something to, prevent this from happening. And again, I'm not blaming the victims that's dead. I'm just saying we have to look at these incidents, drill them down, and say, what could we have done? Forget about what the police could have done. What can you do as citizens to prevent this from happening?
You have a prolific 21-year-long career behind you after retiring from the NYPD in 2013. Take us through your journey in the NYPD.
Oh, my journey in the NYPD, I had a great journey, actually. Even though if you read the book, Once a Cop, you would see there were some bumps in the road. But, I have this hashtag, keep it right, not real. I always kept it right my entire career. I never lost focus of who I was. I didn't change to become a police officer like most people do. And I pretty much went through the police department and ascended to the top fairly quickly. I made sergeant with like 5.5 years. I worked in almost every borough. I made captain with like 13.5 years, which is kind of like warp
Incredible.
speed.
You could say it.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I was the first black commanding officer of the 67 precinct, which is, one of the most prestigious assignments for a commander in the streets in the city of New York. So I had an illustrious career. I don't really have too many complaints. I mean, I'm of the mindset is, everything is meant to be. That's just what it is. And even though I had some bumps in the road, I never didn't let the job disrupt me.
Right.
I just always stayed focused.
Sounds like you've been all over the place and working for various precincts in the NYPD. Could you describe what it was like working in, like you said, the most prestigious precinct, which also has one of the highest crime ratings over in Flatbush? Could you describe the difference between working there and predominantly white neighborhoods, or where the cops are white, like the differences, similarities?
Well, yeah, I could give a clear scenario. I'm of the mindset, and I say all the time that in minority communities they hunt, and white communities they protect and serve. That's just what it is. I lived it. I was a cop in the 114 precinct in Astoria. That's right over the bridge here. Astoria, it's predominantly Greek area. Has some Middle Eastern, but mostly Greek area. It's different. The 67 precinct is in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. It's one of the most violent precincts in the city of New York. But ironically, when you ride through there in the daytime, it's middle-class neighborhood. They got $500,000 houses there, but at nighttime it gets really dangerous. There's a lot of gang activity there. Bloods, Crips, MS-13s. There's a lot of violence in that precinct, and I didn't really understand it until I got there. The first year I was there, we took 242 guns off the street. I think we had like 25 homicides. Even I was there for 3.5 years. I reduced crime every single year. So, police work came easy to me because of my background of being a criminal. I don't know if I was a criminal, but I was a drug dealer when I was young. So I pretty much knew the streets, and I knew how to navigate through the streets, and I knew how to talk to people in the streets. So it was fairly easy. But that was a eye-opening experience because they were black, but it was Caribbeans. I grew up in just a black neighborhood, so I had to learn Caribbean customs also, and I also learned that when we all go to all these Caribbean islands, they don't really trust the police out there. So when they came here, there's really no trust with the police, and I'm trying to bridge this gap, saying, hey, no, you could trust me. This is not the colonial,
Right.
It's not like the colonial times. It's not under British rule or Canadian rule, which is what happens when you go to these Caribbean islands. It's different policing. So, I was able to bridge that gap between community policing. It was a wonderful assignment.
In your book, Once a Cop, you discuss your transition from the streets to becoming a cop. When did you know it was time to make that transition?
Well, I write in a book, December 12th, 1986 was what I guess I would call my ooh-ah moment when I had my son, Corey Jr., in Brookdale Hospital. I held him in my arms, and I said, well, what kind of hero am I going to be? Either I'm going to be in the streets or I'm going to change my life. And my father left. If you read the book, he left when I was in the 3rd grade, so he wasn't there. I only remember one time he ever told me he loved me, actually. So I wanted to be there. I wanted to see him say da-da, crawl, walk, and all that good stuff. So that was a defining moment, and it still took me almost a year to get out. But right then, I was like, I got to get out of here.
Do you think that on the ground level policing, like you said, going out there and trying to make the difference, trying to bridge that gap, do you think that can start and create a trend of some semblance of trust between the community and policing?
Oh, yeah, it definitely can happen. But you got to understand, in a paramilitary organization, which police is change only comes top down. You're talking about doing a cultural and a behavioral change in the police department. It's the biggest police department in the country. You're not going to change culture. Just today, we saw there was I think you spoke about it on the opening, 66-year-old woman was murdered or was killed by the cops.
Yeah, Miss Deborah Danner.
Right, and the police commissioner came right out and said, we're wrong. But if you looked in the newspaper today, the PBA, which is the union of all the cops, they're beating him up saying, oh, you threw us under the bus. So, change comes top down in a paramilitary organization. So he came out, pretty much saw the fact pattern. I wasn't even there, and I know it was wrong. Because when you have an emotionally disturbed person, you got to isolate, contain, give clear, concise orders, have a zone of safety. There's no reason you should be in there shooting a 66-year-old woman. It just doesn't happen. So the change has to come top down. And when I say that, I mean, they have to be more transparent. They have to discipline people. I understand. I was a cop, and cops, two things really scare cops. One, watching their buddies being walked out in handcuffs, and 2, trying to figure out how they're going to pay their mortgage at the end of the month. So when you start suspending these guys, when they spit at somebody, you got to suspend them. You can't wait till they shoot somebody and try to find them. Even this guy that just killed that 66-year-old woman today in the newspaper, he had two complaints, so he's been sued already for a few $1 million. Right. So they just keep pacifying them, you're going to get the same thing.
Talk about the power of police unions across the country.
Well, police unions are what they are. It's unions. So, in America, the union laws are very stringent and strong. So it's like I always look at the Pantaleo case. He killed Eric Garner, and everybody's all up in arms because he hasn't been disciplined. It's over 2 years. But you have to, if you understand the union laws, the police department is not going to internally discipline a guy until the federal case is over. So everybody's up in arms. These are the laws. These are the rules. American citizens, especially black American citizens, just want police to be their feet held to the fire. Pantaleo, the case was given to the district attorney. He decided not to charge for whatever reason, and that's all we want. It's like in Baltimore with the Freddie Gray case. 5 cops locked up. They went to all we can ask for is American justice system. They doing it. If they get found not guilty, there's really nothing more we can do.
Right.
Before video cameras, they weren't even getting to that step. So now with the onset of social media and video cameras, at least people are getting arrested and going to a court of law.
Is police video camera usage, whether if it's on their dashboard or on their person, do you think that is a step in the right direction, considering the top-down maneuver you were talking about previous?
Yeah, I definitely believe. I was a big advocate for video until I saw Eric Garner murdered on video and nobody went to jail. But then I had to sit back and think. It's a piece of it. It's a piece to the case. Before we didn't have video, at least, the police were making a narrative themselves before. They would say, hey, he reached for my gun. And we said, oh, we give the police the benefit of the doubt. Now they can't create the narrative because we're watching the video.
Right.
So I believe video helps. What I propose with the videos, because I know what happens in these situations. Let's say NYPD, I think they got like 4,000 cameras. They're giving them to the good cops.
Yeah.
They give them, because you're not going to have no complaints.
Right.
But I propose to give them. You got a complaint, you get a camera.
Yeah.
You got 2 complaints, you get a camera. Everybody, give all the bad cops the cameras. The good cops don't need cameras because you're never
Maybe
going
when
to see
promotions
anything.
come around, but besides
Exactly.
then,
You need to give them to the bad cameras. I also propose they just start doing some letter grades, just like the restaurants that have A, B, C. You're not going to a C restaurant. So if a cop rolls up on you, he has a C on his lapel, you're going to sit back and say, hey, this guy got some issues. I'm not going to play with him. If it's an A cop, then this is probably a good guy. These are things like we got to do some different stuff around here to change policing.
During your time on the force, like what was your approach to policing?
Well, my approach to policing was easy. It was because, remember, I was a young black kid growing up in the 80s. The cops was like, they was all corrupt. They was getting paid off. They was hitting us with nightsticks. I mean, I have stories. They was going through our pockets, taking our money. It was a mess. So my mindset as a cop was like, yo, just do the right thing. I just wanted to do what was right. One of my first arrests, I write about in a book where I arrested a guy and the 2 cops. It was 2 white cops came up and they beat the guy up and he had handcuffs. And I was standing there saying, yo, what the hell are y'all doing? Like, this isn't, I didn't learn this in the police academy. And I told the supervisor right there. So very early on, I had a reputation that you can't do this stuff in front of Pegues because he's not having it.
Right.
Which was good. So I was like the outsider, nobody wants to eat lunch with me. Nobody want to talk to me. But it was fun. I didn't care about that because I just wanted to do my 8 and straight home, and I was good.
You're listening to Harlem Beat on WHCR 90.3 FM. Our guest is retired NYPD Commander Corey Pegues, author of Once a Cop, The Street, The Law, 2 Worlds, 1 Man. Now, according to The Guardian's cohesive list of Americans slain by police called The Counted, 206 of the 865 Americans slain this year by police are black. The only group killed at a higher rate is Native Americans, which has gone virtually unreported. Why, in your opinion, do police kill or are more likely to kill unarmed black people like Eric Garner, Philando Castile, or Laquan McDonald when they are able to apprehend white criminals without killing them?
That's a great question. So it's obvious in New York. It's like being an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic, you're going to AAA. You got to say, hey, my name is Corey Pegues. I'm an alcoholic. Somebody in law enforcement has to raise their hand and say, hey, we have an issue with police in the black community. I mean, we just saw with the Tarek Kutcher case. He's in a helicopter. He said, he looks like a bad man. Well, what looks bad about him? You're in a helicopter. He's a black man with his hands up. So there's an inherent, almost a cultural thing where they're coming to black communities and they're thinking like, these people are dangerous. And, I did 21 years. I had thousands of cops work for me. All white cops are not bad. I got a story in there of a white cop that was just deathly afraid to work in Harlem because he thought like all the black guys was like animals. And I was like, no, they're not all animals. And I was more afraid to put him out there.
Right.
And he wasn't a racist. He was just scared. I'd rather have a racist out there than this guy.
Who doesn't know and understand.
Who didn't know, but he was just scared. So they have to do something more with like the cultural awareness training. You got, and I propose like maybe for the first 5 years having cops live kind of in the area. Not if you work at Harlem, live in Harlem, but if you work at Harlem, you should have to live within the 5 boroughs.
Right.
Because it's different when you go into the produce aisle and you see the guy you locked up as opposed to living 85 miles away. You're never going to see these people. But if you live and feeling and breathing what's going on in the community, then, it changes attitudes.
On that same note, would you say that experience of being in the community is more valuable than, let's say, a criminal justice degree?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, I always joke. Like for me, like they didn't even have to send me to the police academy. So I had a street degree.
Yeah.
It was easy. Like you can't read a book and figure out how to come in my community. So like if you sent me to Chinatown, I need to read a book to figure out the customs and all of that stuff.
Right,
you understand
right,
what I'm saying? So you put me in my community. It's like you know, if they put you in a community where people you comfortable with. You don't really need to read a book to figure that out. You kind of know the customs and things like that. So they have to put, and I'm a realist, that you can't have a whole black police force. It's just not enough black cops to put in all the black communities. But you can have some people that don't look like black people as long as black people, what I've learned growing around the country, they don't care if the cop is red or green. They just want the cop to respect them. That's all. That's all black people want. Because I know some black cops, I don't want them in my community. I know some white cops, I want them in my community because I know what they're made of.
Like during your time in the PSA number 2 in the 67th precinct, you had programs like juvenile robbery intervention program and the juvenile recidivist reduction program. Tell us the impact of these programs, how the impact that these programs had on the community.
Yeah, I see you really read the book. You're talking about JRIP, Juvenile Robbery Intervention Program. So what we did was we grabbed over 100, I forget the number, maybe over 100 kids, and so the qualification had to be they lived in the projects because that's where I was working. They had to be between the ages of 13 and like 15 or 18 and committed a robbery. So when we compiled this list of like 100 kids, they were responsible for over 1,000 robberies. So what we did was focus enforcement. Well, you know, we went to their house, spoke to their parents, went to their schools. If they had probation or parole meetings, we went there. So basically, we were like a pain in their neck for a year. But then you saw the results if you read the book. After the first year, those same kids committed less than 100 robberies or maybe 50. It was amazing. It was amazing because if you pay attention to people and we was giving them opportunities. We was telling them, listen, you could go to this trade school where I hope you get back into your high school. We was talking to principals. And that's all kids need. They just need a chance. You know, one of the programs I hate on television is Scared Straight. Because they send them, you know, they take them to prison and tell them they're going to do all this crazy stuff. And then they drop them back in the environment. Like if you don't I used to be a wolf in the streets. So a wolf got to eat. I understand. Like if you take me out the street and give me opportunity, I'll go for it. But if you take me out the street and just drop me back there, then I'm a wolf. I got to eat. So you got to give kids tangible choices.
The Eric Garner murder was caught on video for the whole world to see. But a Staten Island jury found the officer who choked him to death, as you previously mentioned, Daniel Pantaleo, not guilty, and he's since gotten a raise. Can you suggest some better ways to hold officers accountable for their actions when cases like this show that maybe we're not doing enough?
Yeah, well, so let me just clarify. He didn't get a raise, so because I saw it in the newspapers. Because if you're not in the police department, you don't know. So basically, they took him off the streets. He's what we call a rubber gun squad. He has no gun. He's working in a unit, and it just so happens that unit he's working in, it requires overtime. Like. Gotcha. If his relief doesn't come, he has to stay at work. And I also know the tricks of the trade, too, that they're taking care of him, saying, hey, we're going to give you 8 hours today. You can get 20 hours this week. So I understand that. But just let's be clear. He didn't get a raise. Trust me, when they brought that situation out, the police commissioner of a department of almost 40,000 people. He's not looking at Pantaleo, but I'm quite sure when I hit the newspaper, he was pretty pissed off. Right. And I guarantee you Pantaleo's probably not making no more overtime right now. So, again, with union rules, like you can only suspend a cop with no pay for 30 days. Then you got to bring him back. Right. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. So, like Pantaleo, he had to go back to work. Right. We are innocent until proven guilty. It went through the judicial system. And I'm not defending the guy. I think he was totally wrong. I mean, he clearly violated a NYPD department regulation. He should be fired. He caused the death of somebody. And I'm really stuck that he was the only one that was charged when I saw about 3 people on his chest and 10 people around. But, you know, it is what it is. But what we can do is start. But look at Pantaleo. He had 7 or 8 complaints. He was getting sued for $60 million. Like, what were they doing to all these other complaints he was getting before he killed somebody?
Right. Before we close off, we just want to make sure everybody knows something.
Please tell the listeners how they can get your book.
Please, yes. The book is called Once a Cop, The Street, the Law, 2 Worlds, 1 Man. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Nobles. You can get it at Target. It's all over the internet. It's everywhere. And please go on my website. Can I pump my website?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's my name, www.CoreyPegues.com, CoreyPegues. Twitter is CPegues. Instagram is CPegues9098. Snapchat. I'm everywhere. Please follow. And if you look on my website, you'll see upcoming events. I'll be in Brooklyn November 5th. I'll be in Penn State in a couple of weeks. I'm everywhere.
And just because most of our listeners are just listeners, I wanted everybody to know that you have 2 hashtags that you usually associate yourself with. As you mentioned before, it was hashtag keep it right, not real. And the other one was, right on your chest, hashtag once a cop after the book. I was like, where did I write it down?
Once a cop, yes.
All right. Now,
and I got new hashtags.
Hit them.
I got new hashtags. Comply, then complain, or comply and die. And Corey said it, and pay attention. That's my new ones. Corey said it, pay attention.
I like it.
Yes, go to my YouTube channel. Look at all my videos. I got a bunch of videos on YouTube.
We can reach you absolutely everywhere. Now,
Please.
Before we go, I just wanted to make mention of, in 2014, we have Kenneth Thompson, who became the first African-American district attorney for Brooklyn. Mr. Tomlish established something known as the Wrongful Conviction Unit, which has vindicated 21 prisoners from questionable behavior from the prosecutor. Unfortunately, Mr. Thompson passed at the beginning of this month. Can you talk about some of the importance in continuing his work?
Yeah, Ken Thompson was a very, very good friend of mine. A very good friend. Unfortunately, I was on the book tour. I couldn't be at his funeral. I don't know if you know, his mother was a cop right down the block.
One of the first.
In the 20th
Female.
precinct, yes. Yeah, I mean, around the country you see, there's a lot of people in the Innocence Project. There's a lot of people that's in jail that shouldn't be. DNA is exonerating a whole bunch of people. So, yeah, it needs to continue.
Alrighty. All right. Thank you, Mr. Pegues, for coming out and visiting us today. Just one more time, Mr. Pegues is the author of Once a Cop. And I'm Matt Herman.
I'm Guilford McCormick.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, Matt and Guilford. Tonight's reporters were Messiah Sterling, Matt Herman, and Guilford McCormick. The radio journalism class is taught by Professor Angela Hardin. The board professor is Alex Gutierrez, assisted by WHCR's project manager, Tina Dixon. I'm your host, Leilani Goodwin. Thank you, Harlem, for lending your ears to listen to your beat, and have a good night.